My name is Julian Hart. I am 21 years old, and 2 months ago, I inherited $8 million from my grandparents who raised me. The day after I secured that money in a trust to protect it, my parents and older sister, who I had barely spoken to in years, showed up at my apartment with smiles on their faces and demands in their voices. They said we needed to talk about our family money. They said I had a moral obligation to share. They said I was being selfish and ungrateful. But what they did not know was that I had found evidence of what they did to my grandparents. Years of financial abuse, tens of thousands of dollars stolen, and now they wanted me to just forget about it and hand them millions. I had to make a choice: give them the money to keep the peace, or honor my grandparents' wishes and face the consequences. This is the story of how I chose justice over family, and how that choice cost me everything except my self-respect. Let me start at the beginning. My grandparents, Thomas and Eleanor Hart, were the most important people in my life. They were not wealthy in the flashy sense. They did not have mansions or yachts or private jets, but they were comfortable. My grandfather had been a dentist for 40 years, building a successful practice in a small town. My grandmother had been a high school teacher. They saved carefully, invested wisely, and by the time they retired, they had built a substantial estate. Their house was paid off, worth about $700,000. They had retirement accounts worth about $4 million. They had savings and investments worth another $3 million, plus life insurance policies and other assets. All told, their estate was worth about $8.5 million, and they left all of it to me, not to their son, my father, not to their daughter-in-law, my mother, not split among their grandchildren, just to me, and there was a reason for that. My parents had me when they were young. Mom was 19, Dad was 20. They were not ready to be parents. They were still trying to figure out their own lives, still partying, still acting like teenagers. When I was born, they tried for a few years to make it work, but they were overwhelmed and resentful. A baby had derailed their plans, forced them into responsibility they did not want. When I was 3 years old, my parents essentially gave me to my grandparents. Not legally, not officially, but practically. They dropped me off at Grandma and Grandpa's house one day and said they needed a break. A few days turned into a few weeks. A few weeks turned into a few months. And by the time I was 4, I was living with my grandparents full-time. My parents would visit occasionally. They would show up on holidays or birthdays with gifts and apologies and promises to do better. But they never took me back. They never even tried. They went on with their lives, eventually having another child, my sister Melissa, when I was 7. And Melissa they kept. Melissa they raised, which told me everything I needed to know about how they felt about me. But I was not sad about it. I was happy, because my grandparents were amazing. Grandpa taught me to fish, to fix things, to handle money responsibly. Grandma taught me to cook, to read, to be kind. They went to every school event, every parent-teacher conference, every sports game. They helped me with homework. They talked to me about life and values and what it meant to be a good person. They gave me structure and stability and unconditional love. They also made sure I understood the value of money. Grandpa would sit me down and explain compound interest, the importance of saving, how to invest wisely. He showed me his own portfolio, explained how he had built wealth slowly over decades by living below his means and making smart choices. He said he wanted me to understand these things because someday I would inherit everything, and he needed to know I would not waste it. Julian, he told me when I was 16, your grandmother and I have worked hard our whole lives. We have been smart with our money, and we want to pass that on to you, not because you are entitled to it, but because we love you and we trust you. We trust that you will use this money wisely, that you will build a good life with it, that you will take care of yourself and maybe help others along the way. Can you promise me that?" "I promise, Grandpa," I said, and I meant it. My parents, meanwhile, had terrible relationships with money. Dad bounced from job to job, always looking for the next big thing, always convinced he was one scheme away from getting rich. Mom spent money on things they could not afford, always trying to keep up appearances, always buying designer clothes and expensive cars they could not pay for. They were constantly in debt, constantly fighting about money, constantly asking my grandparents for loans. And my grandparents, because they loved their son, gave them money, thousands and thousands of dollars over the years. Money for rent when they could not pay, money for car repairs, money for medical bills, money for Melissa's private school tuition, because my parents insisted she needed to go to the best schools. My grandparents helped, because that is what parents do. They help their children. But it was never enough. My parents always needed more, and they started to get resentful when my grandparents said no. They started making comments about how Grandma and Grandpa had all this money and were being selfish by not sharing more. They started pressuring them, manipulating them, making them feel guilty. And then things got worse, much worse. But I did not know about that until after my grandparents died. Grandpa passed away 2 years ago when I was 19. Heart attack. Sudden and unexpected. He was 72 and had been healthy. One day he was fine. The next day he was gone. It destroyed Grandma. They had been married for 50 years. They were best friends. She was lost without him. I was in my second year of college when Grandpa died. I came home immediately and stayed with Grandma for 2 weeks, making sure she was okay, helping her with funeral arrangements, just being there. My parents came to the funeral, of course, looking appropriately sad. But I noticed they were also very interested in Grandpa's estate. They kept asking Grandma questions about the will, about finances, about what would happen to the house and the money. Grandma told them firmly that everything had been arranged. She and Grandpa had a will. Everything was handled. They did not need to worry about it. After the funeral, I went back to school, but I visited Grandma every weekend. I wanted to make sure she was okay. She was lonely and grieving, but she was managing. She stayed active, kept going to her book club and her volunteer work at the library. She talked about Grandpa a lot, telling stories, remembering their life together. It was therapeutic for both of us. My parents, meanwhile, started visiting Grandma more frequently. At first, I thought they were being supportive, but Grandma mentioned to me that they kept bringing up money. They would ask her if she needed help managing her finances. They would suggest she give them power of attorney to make things easier. They would hint that she should update her will, maybe leave them something directly instead of just leaving everything to me. They are worried about their inheritance, Grandma told me sadly. They think I am going to forget about them. But Julian, your grandfather and I made our decision years ago. We are leaving everything to you, not because we do not love your father, but because we do not trust him with money, and we want to make sure you are taken care of. Grandma, I do not need millions of dollars, I said. If it would make things easier with Mom and Dad, you could split it up however you want. No, she said firmly. Your grandfather and I discussed this at length. We made our choice. You have been our son in every way that matters. You have been responsible and grateful and loving. Your parents have been none of those things. This is our money, Julian. We earned it, and we get to decide what happens to it. We choose you. I hugged her and thanked her, but I was also worried. I could see the stress the situation was putting on her, the constant pressure from my parents, the guilt they were making her feel, the arguments that were starting to happen. Things came to a head about 8 months after Grandpa died. Grandma called me one night, upset. She said my parents had been at her house all day, pressuring her to sign papers. They said they needed her to give them power of attorney because she was getting older and might forget things. They said it was for her protection. They said they would manage her money and make sure she was taken care of. But Grandma was not senile. She was 70 years old and sharp as ever. She did not need anyone managing her money. She had been managing it just fine with Grandpa for 50 years, and she knew what my parents really wanted. They wanted access to her accounts. They wanted control. She refused to sign anything, and when she refused, my parents got angry. They said she was being stubborn and paranoid. They said they were only trying to help. They said if she was not going to let them help, maybe they should not bother visiting anymore. And then they left, and they did not visit again for 3 months. During those 3 months, I visited Grandma every weekend like always. She seemed okay at first, but gradually I noticed changes. She was more forgetful, more confused. She would repeat stories she had just told me. She would forget what day it was. Small things, but concerning. I suggested she see a doctor. She did, and they ran tests. The diagnosis was early-stage dementia. Not severe yet, but progressing. The doctor said it was common at her age, especially after losing a spouse. The grief and loneliness could accelerate cognitive decline. I was devastated. Grandma was my person. The thought of losing her the way we lost Grandpa was unbearable, but I tried to be strong for her. I started visiting twice a week instead of just weekends. I helped her set up systems to remember things. Pill organizers, calendars, reminder notes. I made sure she was eating and taking her medications. And then my parents heard about the diagnosis. Suddenly, they were back. Suddenly, they cared again. They started visiting Grandma regularly, being super attentive, helping her with things. At first, I thought maybe they had genuinely changed. Maybe hearing about her dementia had scared them into being better. But I was wrong. It started small. Grandma mentioned to me that my dad had asked to borrow $5,000 for some business opportunity. She said she gave it to him because he was her son and he promised to pay it back. Then a few weeks later, she mentioned giving my mom $3,000 to help with some car repairs. Then another loan to my dad for $10,000. Then another. I started asking questions. How much had she given them? She could not remember exactly. A lot, she thought. But they were family, and they needed help. I asked if they had paid any of it back. She did not think so, but maybe they had, and she just forgot. I was getting worried. I asked Grandma if I could look at her bank statements, just to make sure everything was okay. She agreed, and what I found made me sick. In the 6 months since my parents started visiting regularly, Grandma had withdrawn over $80,000 in cash. The withdrawal slips all said, "Family loan," in the memo line. There were also checks written to my parents. $20,000 here, $15,000 there. All told, my parents had taken over $120,000 from Grandma in 6 months, and that was just what I could see in recent statements. I asked Grandma if she had older statements, and we found them in her filing cabinet. Going back 2 years to before Grandpa died, the pattern was there. Smaller amounts at first, but consistent. My parents had been asking for money for years, and my grandparents had been giving it because they loved their son and wanted to help. But this was not helping. This was exploitation. This was taking advantage of an elderly woman with dementia. I confronted my parents. I called them and asked to meet. We met at a coffee shop, and I brought the bank statements. I showed them the numbers. Over $200,000 in 2 years. Most of it in the last year, after Grandpa died and Grandma was vulnerable. "You are stealing from her," I said. "You are taking advantage of the fact that she has dementia and cannot remember how much she is giving you." My dad got defensive immediately. "We are not stealing. She gives us the money willingly. We are her family. We need help sometimes. She has dementia. She does not understand what she is doing. And you know that. You are exploiting her." That is ridiculous. My mom said, "Your grandmother loves us. She wants to help us. There is nothing wrong with accepting help from family. Accepting help is one thing. Taking hundreds of thousands of dollars is something else. And I notice none of it has been paid back. These are not loans. This is theft. You have no right to accuse us of anything," my dad said angrily. "We are her son and daughter-in-law. You are just the grandson she took in because we were too young to raise you." That hurt, but I did not let it show. Grandma took me in because you did not want me, and she and Grandpa raised me because they loved me, and now you are stealing from her. "We are not stealing," my mom insisted, "and frankly, it is none of your business. This is between us and Eleanor. It is my business, because I am the one who visits her twice a week. I am the one who makes sure she is okay. I am the one who actually cares about her, instead of just seeing her as a source of money." The conversation went nowhere. They denied wrongdoing. They said I was being dramatic. They said they were going to keep visiting Grandma, and I could not stop them. And they were right. I could not stop them. Grandma was an adult. If she wanted to give them money, that was her choice. Even if she had dementia and could not fully understand what she was doing, but I could protect her going forward. I talked to a lawyer who specialized in elder law. I explained the situation. The lawyer said it was complicated. If Grandma was competent enough to manage her own affairs, no one could stop her from giving money away. But if she was not competent, then someone could petition for guardianship or conservatorship. I did not want to go that route. I did not want to take away Grandma's independence or make her feel like a child, but I needed to protect her somehow. The lawyer suggested setting up a trust. If Grandma agreed, she could transfer her assets into a trust with me as the trustee. That way, the money would be protected and managed, but Grandma could still access it for her needs. My parents would not be able to just ask for money and get it. I talked to Grandma about it. I explained what was happening, showed her the bank statements, helped her understand how much money my parents had taken. She was shocked and hurt. She had not realized how much it was. She had been giving them money in small increments, never tracking the total, never realizing it had added up to over $200,000. "I thought I was helping them," she said sadly. "I thought I was being a good mother." "You are a good mother, but they are taking advantage of you, and we need to stop it." She agreed to the trust. We set it up with the lawyer, transferred most of her assets into it, left enough in her personal account for daily expenses. I became the trustee, which meant I could manage the money and make sure it was used appropriately. Grandma could still access funds for anything she needed, but my parents could not just take it anymore. When my parents found out, they were furious. They accused me of manipulating Grandma, of stealing her money, of trying to cut them out. They threatened to sue me. They threatened to contest the trust. They said I was turning Grandma against her own son, but the trust was legal and properly executed, and Grandma, despite her dementia, was still competent enough to make that decision. The lawyer had documented everything. There was nothing my parents could do, except cut off contact, which they did. They stopped visiting Grandma. They stopped calling. They were angry that they could not get money anymore, so they just abandoned her. Again, Grandma lived for another 8 months after we set up the trust. Her dementia progressed, but she was comfortable and well cared for. I visited her constantly. I made sure she had everything she needed. I held her hand and told her stories and reminded her that she was loved. She passed away peacefully in her sleep last May. I was 21, had just graduated from college, and lost the person who mattered most to me in the world. The funeral was difficult. My parents came, along with my sister Melissa, who I barely knew. They cried and looked sad and acted like grieving family members. But I could see through it. I could see them wondering about the will. wondering what they would get, wondering if the trust would be dissolved now that Grandma was gone. After the funeral, the will was read. It was simple and clear. Everything Grandma had, which was everything she and Grandpa had built together, was left to me. The house, the remaining investments, the life insurance, all of it. My parents got nothing. My sister got nothing. Just me. The estate was valued at approximately $8 million after taxes and expenses. $8 million. More money than I had ever imagined having. More money than I knew what to do with. My parents were shocked. They were angry. After the reading of the will, my dad pulled me aside and said we needed to talk about splitting this fairly. I told him there was nothing to split. Grandma had made her wishes clear. He said that was not fair, that he was her son, that he deserved something. I reminded him that he had already taken over $200,000 from her. He said that was different. That was just help when they needed it. I said it was theft, and he was lucky I had not reported him to the police. We did not speak after that. They left the lawyer's office angry, and I did not hear from them for 3 weeks. During those 3 weeks, I worked with the estate attorney to settle Grandma's affairs. I had the house appraised. I transferred assets out of the trust and into my name, and I made a decision. I was going to set up a new trust for the inheritance, not because I had to, but because I wanted to protect it. Protect it from my parents, who would undoubtedly come asking for money. Protect it from myself, so I would not do anything stupid. Protect it so it would last and grow and eventually benefit others. I set up an irrevocable trust with strict terms. I could access income from the trust for living expenses, education, and reasonable purchases, but I could not withdraw the principal for frivolous things. I could not give large sums to family members without approval from the trustee board, which consisted of Grandma and Grandpa's estate attorney and 2 financial advisors. The trust was designed to protect the money and ensure it was used wisely. It was exactly what my grandparents would have wanted. They had taught me to be responsible with money, and I was honoring that by setting up protections. The trust was finalized on a Wednesday. That Saturday, there was a knock on my apartment door. I opened it to find my parents and Melissa standing there, all of them smiling. "Julian," my mom said brightly, "we have been thinking about you. We wanted to come by and see how you are doing. We know the last few months have been hard." I was immediately suspicious. They had not checked on me in weeks. They had not been there when I was grieving, when I was drowning in estate paperwork, when I was trying to figure out what to do with my life. But now, right after the trust was finalized, they were here with smiles and concern. "I am fine," I said. "What do you want?" "Can we come in?" my dad asked. "We want to talk to you about something important." I let them in, mostly because I was curious about what they would say. They sat on my couch, still smiling, acting like we were a happy family. "Julian, we know you just inherited a lot of money from your grandmother," my mom started, "and we want to talk to you about how to handle it responsibly." "I am handling it responsibly. I set up a trust." "A trust?" My dad looked surprised. "Why would you do that?" "To protect the money, to make sure it is used wisely. It is what Grandma and Grandpa would have wanted." "But Julian, you are so young," my mom said. "You do not have experience managing large sums of money. Maybe you should let us help you. Your father and I could be co-trustees, help you make smart decisions." I almost laughed. "You want to be co-trustees of my inheritance?" "We are your parents," my dad said. "We want to help you. We want to make sure you do not make mistakes. The trust is already set up. I have professional financial advisors and attorneys managing it. I do not need your help." "Julian, we are family," my sister Melissa spoke up. It was the first time she had said anything. "And family shares. You have $8 million. That is more money than any of us will ever need. The right thing to do would be to share it with us. There it was. The real reason they were here. They wanted money. Grandma left the money to me, I said carefully. Not to you. Not to Mom and Dad. To me. She made that choice deliberately. That was before she had dementia, my dad said. She was not thinking clearly. If she had been in her right mind, she would have left something to us. She set up her will when Grandpa was still alive, long before she had any dementia, and even if she had changed it later, she would have left it to me, because you stole from her, because you exploited her. We never stole anything, my mom said angrily. She gave us that money willingly. She gave it because she had dementia and you manipulated her. You took over $200,000 from an elderly woman with cognitive decline. That is financial elder abuse. How dare you accuse us of that? My dad stood up, his face red. We are her family. We had every right to that money. And frankly, we have a right to this inheritance too. Your grandmother was our family, not just yours. She was more mine than yours, I said. She raised me. She loved me. She was there for every important moment of my life. Where were you? Oh, right. You were too busy having another kid, the one you actually wanted. Melissa looked hurt. That is not fair. It is completely fair. Mom and Dad gave me to Grandma and Grandpa when I was 3 because they did not want to deal with me. They kept you. They raised you. They chose you over me. And now they want me to share the inheritance from the grandparents who actually raised me? No, that is not happening. Julian, we made mistakes when you were young, my mom said, but we are still your parents, and we are going through a difficult time financially. We need help, and you have more than enough to help us. How much do you need? I asked, curious to see what they would say. Well, my dad said, we have some debts we need to pay off, about $100,000 in credit card debt, and we would like to buy a new house, something around $500,000. And we think it would be fair if Melissa got something too, maybe $200,000 for her education and to get started in life. So altogether, maybe $1 million. $1 million. They wanted $1 million from me, just like that, as if it was nothing, as if I owed them. No, I said simply. No. My mom looked shocked. Julian, we are your parents. You cannot just say no. I can, and I am. Grandma left this money to me. She specifically did not leave it to you. That was her choice, and I am going to respect her choice. You are being selfish, Melissa said. You have $8 million. You could easily afford to help us. You are right, I could afford it. But I am not going to, because you do not deserve it. None of you do. We raised you, my dad said. We gave you life. You owe us. You did not raise me. Grandma and Grandpa raised me. You dumped me on them and forgot about me. And now you want to cash in because I inherited money from the people who actually loved me? That is not how this works. If you do not help us, you will regret it, my dad said, his voice turning threatening. We can make your life very difficult. Are you threatening me? We are reminding you that we are your family, and family takes care of each other. If you refuse to help us, there will be consequences. Get out, I said. Get out of my apartment. Now. Julian, get out before I call the police and tell them about the $200,000 you stole from Grandma. That got them moving. They left, still angry, still making threats. Melissa shot me a look of pure hatred on her way out, and then they were gone. I sat on my couch shaking. I had just burned bridges with my family, my parents, my sister, everyone except my grandparents, who were already gone. I was alone, but I was also right. I knew I was right. My grandparents had left that money to me for a reason. They did not trust my parents with it. They knew what would happen. They knew my parents would waste it, would spend it on things they did not need, would blow through millions in a few years and have nothing to show for it. And they knew I would be responsible. They knew I would honor their memory by being smart with the money, by making it count. Over the next few weeks, my parents tried everything to get money from me. They called constantly. They sent emails. They showed up at my apartment. When I would not give them money, they tried guilt. They reminded me of the times they helped me as a kid, conveniently forgetting that those times were few and far between. They told me I was tearing the family apart. They said Grandma would be disappointed in me. That last one made me angry. Grandma would not be disappointed. Grandma had made her choice. She left everything to me specifically to keep it away from them. She knew what they were. She knew they would exploit any access to money. When guilt did not work, they tried threats. They said they were going to sue me to contest the will. They said they would claim Grandma was incompetent when she made the will. They said they would drag me through court and make the whole process a nightmare. I called the estate attorney who had handled Grandma's will. He said they could try to contest it, but they had no grounds. Grandma had been evaluated by doctors and deemed competent. The will was legally sound. Any lawsuit would be frivolous and would likely be dismissed quickly. Let them try, I said. I am not giving them a cent. They did try. They filed a lawsuit claiming that I had manipulated Grandma, that I had isolated her from her family, that I had coerced her into leaving everything to me. It was all nonsense, and it was quickly dismissed by the judge, who said there was no evidence of any wrongdoing and the will was clearly valid. But the lawsuit damaged our relationship even further. Not that there was much of a relationship to damage. We were not speaking. They had made it clear they only cared about money. I had made it clear I was not going to give them any. Then things got worse. My dad started telling people in our family and community that I had stolen from Grandma. He said I had manipulated her into cutting them out of the will. He said I was greedy and selfish and had torn the family apart for money. He told anyone who would listen that I was a terrible person. Some people believed him. Some relatives stopped talking to me. Some family friends gave me dirty looks, but others saw through it. They knew my parents' history. They knew I had been raised by my grandparents. They knew who the real victims were. One person who saw through it was my grandparents' estate attorney, Robert Donovan. He was in his 60s and had known my grandparents for 30 years. He called me about a month after the lawsuit was dismissed. "Julian, I want to show you something," he said. "Something your grandparents asked me to give you after they were gone, but only if your parents tried to contest the will or cause problems. They anticipated this might happen." He invited me to his office. When I arrived, he handed me a thick folder. Inside were documents, bank statements, canceled checks, emails, letters. "What is this?" I asked. "This is evidence of financial abuse," Robert said. "Your grandparents started documenting your parents' behavior about 5 years ago. Every time your parents asked for money, your grandparents kept records. They tracked how much they gave, what it was supposedly for, whether it was ever paid back. They also tracked suspicious activity. Times when your parents asked your grandmother to co-sign loans. Times when they tried to get access to accounts. Times when they made inappropriate requests." I started reading through the documents. It was worse than I thought. My parents had not just taken $200,000 in the last 2 years. They had been exploiting my grandparents for over a decade. Small amounts at first. 1,000 here, 2,000 there. But it added up. Over 10 years, my parents had taken over $400,000 from my grandparents. Why did Grandma and Grandpa keep giving them money if they knew what was happening? I asked. "Because your father is their son," Robert said sadly. "They loved him. They wanted to believe he would change. They wanted to believe the next loan would be the last one. But it never was. And eventually, they realized they needed to protect their estate. That is when they made the decision to leave everything to you. Did my parents know about this documentation? No. Your grandparents kept it secret. They wanted to give your parents the benefit of the doubt. They did not want to create more family conflict. But they also wanted to make sure you were protected if your parents tried to come after the inheritance. This documentation proves a pattern of financial exploitation. If your parents try to sue you again, this evidence will destroy any credibility they have. I looked through more of the documents. There were emails from my dad asking for money, making up emergencies that probably were not real. There were text messages from my mom guilt-tripping grandma. There were even some documents showing that my parents had forged grandma's signature on a loan application. They committed fraud. I said, yes. Your grandparents could have reported them to the police, but they did not want to see their son go to jail. They loved him, despite everything, so they just documented it and moved on. I felt sick. My parents were not just greedy. They were criminals. They had exploited and abused my grandparents for years, and they felt entitled to do it because they were family. What should I do with this? I asked. That is up to you. If your parents continue to harass you or try to sue you again, you can use this as leverage. You can show them that you have evidence of their crimes and you are willing to use it. That should be enough to make them back off. Or you can report them to the police and let the justice system handle it. I took the folder home and thought about it for days. Part of me wanted to report them immediately. They deserved to be punished for what they did. But another part of me hesitated. They were still my parents, even if they were terrible parents. Did I really want to send them to prison? I thought about what my grandparents would want. They had not reported my parents when they were alive. They had chosen to protect them despite everything. But they had also made sure I had the ammunition to protect myself, if needed. I decided on a middle path. I would not report them to the police unless they came after me again, but I would let them know I had the evidence. I would make sure they understood that if they continued to harass me, there would be consequences. I sent them a letter, a physical letter, delivered by certified mail, so I would know they received it. In the letter, I explained that I had documentation of their financial abuse of my grandparents. I listed specific amounts and dates. I mentioned the forged signature. I told them that if they continued to contact me, harass me, spread lies about me, or try to contest the will again, I would turn this evidence over to the police, and they would face criminal charges for fraud and elder abuse. I also told them that I was not interested in having a relationship with them. They had made it clear that they only cared about money, and I had made it clear that they would not get any from me. We were done. I did not hear from them for 2 weeks. Then I got a response. Not a letter, but a text message from my dad. It said, "You are dead to us. We never want to see you again. You have destroyed this family." I did not respond. There was nothing to say. They had destroyed the family years ago by abandoning me, by exploiting my grandparents, by choosing money over relationships. I was just refusing to enable them anymore, and that was how I lost my family. Or rather, that was how I confirmed that I never really had them in the first place. But I was not entirely alone. I had friends from college. I had mentors and professors who cared about me. I had Robert, the estate attorney, who had become something of a father figure. And most importantly, I had the memory of my grandparents and the knowledge that I was honoring them by protecting what they had built. The trust that I set up for the inheritance had several purposes. The main one was to protect the money and make sure it was used responsibly. But I also wanted to use some of it to honor my grandparents' memory. They had been generous people who cared about education and helping others. I wanted to continue that legacy. I worked with the trust advisors to set up a scholarship fund in my grandparents' name. The scholarship would provide full tuition to students from low-income families who wanted to study dentistry or education. My grandparents' professions. It would start small, maybe 5 scholarships a year, but would grow over time as the trust grew. I also made a donation to the library, where Grandma had volunteered for 30 years. The donation funded a reading room in her name, a space where kids could go to read and do homework and feel safe. And I set aside money to maintain my grandparents' graves. Fresh flowers every week. Upkeep on the headstone. Small things. But things that mattered to me. The rest of the money I left to grow in the trust. I was only 21. I did not need millions of dollars right now. I needed enough to finish school, to get started in life, to have security. But I did not need a mansion or a sports car or a lavish lifestyle. That was not who I was. That was not how my grandparents raised me. I went back to school to get my master's degree. I worked part-time even though I did not need to financially, because I liked working and wanted to stay busy. I lived in a modest apartment and drove a reliable used car. I dated and made friends and built a life. And I tried not to think about my parents. Tried not to wonder if I had made the right choice by cutting them off. Tried not to feel guilty for having so much money when they were struggling. But sometimes I did think about them. I wondered if they were okay. I wondered if Melissa was doing well. I wondered if they ever regretted what they did, or if they just resented me for not giving them money. About 6 months after I sent the letter, I ran into Melissa at a grocery store. It was awkward. We saw each other across the produce section and froze. For a moment, I thought she would turn and walk away, but she did not. She came over. "Hi, Julian," she said quietly. "Hi, Melissa." We stood there for a moment, not knowing what to say. Then she said, "I am sorry about everything. I am sorry for how I acted. I was wrong. I was surprised. Thank you. Mom and Dad are still angry. They have not forgiven you. But I have been thinking a lot about everything, and I realize that you were right. They did exploit Grandma. They did take advantage of her. And it was not okay. I appreciate you saying that. I also want you to know that I do not expect anything from you. I am not here to ask for money or anything like that. I just wanted to say that I am sorry, and that I understand why you did what you did. How are you doing?" I asked. "Are you okay?" "I am figuring it out. I am working and going to school. It is hard without help, but I am managing, and honestly, it is probably good for me. I was spoiled growing up. Mom and Dad gave me everything. I never had to work for anything. Now I am learning what that is like, and it is teaching me things I should have learned years ago." We talked for a few more minutes. It was not a deep conversation, and we did not make plans to stay in touch, but it was something, a small crack in the wall that had been built between us. As she was leaving, she turned back and said, "Julian, I think Grandma and Grandpa would be proud of you. I think they would be happy with what you are doing with the money." That meant more to me than she probably realized. Over the next year, I focused on building my life. I finished my master's degree in business administration. I started working for a nonprofit that provided financial education to low-income families. It felt like a good use of my skills and a way to honor my grandparents, who had taught me so much about money. I also started dating someone seriously. Her name was Emma, and she was smart and kind and had no idea about my inheritance when we first met. When I eventually told her, months into the relationship, she was surprised but not interested in the money. She was more interested in me and who I was as a person. "Do your parents know about the money?" she asked. "Yes. That is why we do not talk anymore." That is sad. It is, but it is also the truth. They were not interested in me as a person. They were interested in what I could give them. And when I would not give them anything, they cut me off. "Their loss," she said. "You are an amazing person. And the fact that you have been responsible with that money instead of blowing it on stupid things says a lot about your character. She was right. I could have taken that $8 million and gone crazy. I could have bought a mansion and a Ferrari and partied for years. I could have lived a life of excess and waste. But that was not me. That was not how I was raised. My grandparents had taught me that money is a tool, not a goal. It is something you use to build a good life, to help others, to create stability and security. It is not something you worship or obsess over. It is just money, and that philosophy has served me well. The trust has grown over the years through smart investments. The scholarship fund has helped dozens of students. The library reading room is used by kids every day, and I have built a life I am proud of. Do I wish things had been different with my parents? Yes. Do I wish they had cared about me as a person instead of as a source of money? Absolutely. Do I regret cutting them off? Sometimes. But mostly I know I made the right choice. Because loving someone does not mean enabling their worst behavior. Loving someone does not mean letting them exploit you. Loving someone does not mean sacrificing your values and your boundaries just to keep the peace. My grandparents loved me by setting boundaries. They loved me by teaching me right from wrong. They loved me by leaving me an inheritance with the expectation that I would use it responsibly. They loved me enough to make hard choices, and I loved them enough to honor those choices, even when it cost me my relationship with my parents. I am 21 years old. I have $8 million in a trust. I have a degree and a career. I have friends and a girlfriend and a life I am building. And I have the memory of two people who loved me unconditionally and taught me everything that matters. My parents think I am selfish for not sharing the money. They think I am cruel for cutting them off. They think I destroyed the family. But I did not destroy the family. They did that years ago when they abandoned me, when they exploited my grandparents, when they chose money over relationships. I just refuse to pretend it never happened. People sometimes ask me if I am happy, and the answer is yes, not because of the money, though financial security certainly helps, but because I am living a life that honors the people who loved me. I am being responsible and generous and kind, just like my grandparents taught me to be. And at the end of the day, that is worth more than all the money in the world. That is worth more than a relationship with people who only cared about what I could give them. That is worth everything. My grandparents believed in me. They trusted me with their legacy, and I am going to spend the rest of my life proving that their trust was not misplaced. That is what family is supposed to be, not people who exploit you or manipulate you or demand things from you, but people who believe in you, who support you, who love you for who you are rather than what you have. I lost my parents, but I never really had them to begin with. What I had were my grandparents. And even though they are gone, their love and their lessons live on in everything I do. That is the real inheritance. Not the money, but the values, the integrity, the strength to do what is right even when it is hard. And I will carry that with me for the rest of my life. Thank you for listening to my story of growing up faster than I ever wanted to. I have left 2 more stories on your screen, both from young men who learned that sometimes becoming an adult does not happen at 18. It happens the moment your family needs you to be strong. Click on whichever one speaks to you. And if you want to join our community of people who understand what it is like to be forced to grow up overnight, that notification bell is waiting. Until tomorrow, remember, age is just a number, but courage defines who you really are.